The quiet orchard in Black Laurel Hollow. I've been a frogger since I was 13, what the message boards call a house ghost. I started because I was hungry. I kept going because slipping between the ribs of someone's life without leaving a fingerprint made my heart remember it was there. People think squatters are drifters or strung out. Froggers are different. We occupy the negative spaces. We are the breath inside the wall, the weight in the attic that never shows on a scale. My handle online is threadbare. They pinned my guide at the top of the forum years ago: maps, crawl space schematics, how to time a family's pipes by the way the house exhales at night. I never steal. Burglars take. Froggers pass through. My name, the one I was given and learned not to keep, is Caleb Mercer. My mother left me, a bundled echo, on a wooden pew of a Baptist church outside Amarillo. After that, it was bleach-bright orphanages and a state-issue suitcase. Foster houses with rules like traps. Cupboards locked. Closets locked. Me locked. I learned the skill of standing in a room like air until I was gone, and when running saved me once, I kept running. Years later, I could have afforded rent. I just never wanted a place that could point back at me. I liked edge spaces, between rafters, under stairs, inside the dead zone where a cabinet doesn't quite meet the wall. I liked proving I could be there and not be there at the same time. I found the hollow by accident. I was riding the afterglow of a clean exit in Fort Collins, 2 weeks inside a modern box where every wall was a screen pretending to be a wall, when I dropped into satellite images like I do when I can't sleep. Thumb flick, drift, zoom. The Appalachians unrolled like an old quilt. Ridges, hollows, creek veins silvering in and out of cloud. Then a square of green punched me in the chest. In the middle of eastern Kentucky's brittle hills, a perfect patch of spring sat inside winter. An orchard by the look of it. Rows of apple and pear. A farmhouse with a wraparound porch. Smoke thread from a chimney. The trees beyond were February thin claws, but this square was July. Too green. Too lush. Too exact. Property records showed nothing. I checked the assessor, old plats, a coal company's ancient survey. Nothing. On 4 different map layers the field held, on every county page, it didn't exist. I posted a screenshot on the forum. Anyone ever ghosted this place? Replies stacked fast. Too rural. You'll get shot. Those mountain families don't call cops. They just bury. Not worth it, threadbare. Pick a lake house. He won't do it. He's not stupid. The words were a door I couldn't not try. I packed the way I always do. Canvas ruck mended with dental floss. Knife I never had to use. Folded tarp. Rubber-soled boots with tire rubber glued over the balding tread. I rode a bus as far as the last gas station with a lit sign, then walked old mining roads until the asphalt gave up and the world turned to rutted mud and leaf rot. 2 days of ridgebacks and creeks led me to Black Laurel Hollow, the place the green square had called itself inside my head. The sound of it fit. The real thing did not. The hills near it were gray and rust, stripped by wind and memory. But the hollow was a wound of color. A boundary tense as a pulled thread. I squatted at the edge and saw it, a thin line stitched through the dirt, the way ash settles when it's been poured with care. 1 step to the right, sour leaf, cold air, the wet cough of February. 1 step to the left, warm breath, clover sweetness, a hint of smoke and apple skin. My palm felt the change. My skin quit flinching. I told myself it was a spring in the ground or a trick of walls of rock, the way hollows keep weather like secrets. I stepped across. The farmhouse sat easy inside the bend of the orchard, white clapboard, porch swing, tin roof freckled with lichen. A windmill clicked from the garden. Chickens stitched the lawn with small, fussing feet. Goats chewed fence posts like they were thinking. Nothing moved with rush, nothing moved with fear. I watched from behind a collapsed rock fence and learned their clock. The man was broad and sunburned in a way that felt earned, not postured. Elias Whitlock I would learn from the embroidery on his work shirt. The woman, Ruth, wore her hair in a low twist, Her sleeves rolled precisely to the same folder-sharp line. 3 children under 10 miles June. They ate outside and passed everything, even the salt, palm to palm. I wanted to be suspicious and found myself, for a minute, simply jealous. I moved as dark finished its work. The window by the mudroom surrendered to a butter knife. Inside smelled like wood soap and apple vinegar and rope. The house was old timber, thick boards that had learned to be a house long enough to stop creaking at every change in weather. The walls held hand-carved saints whose eyes watched a spot 2 inches above your shoulder. Crosses, yes, but not the kind sold in Christian bookstores. These were older, heavier, carved with circles and grains and small animal faces where you didn't expect to find them. The Bible on the table had another book's spine hidden inside its binding. I ate like I always do, proof I had been there without leaving proof I had been there. A corner of cheese. A swallow of milk. A spoon tip of apple butter. I tightened lids carefully and wiped the threads clean with the shirt hem I keep for that work. The false panel that saved me hid beside a washer that had once been manual. Someone had renovated the laundry and mismeasured an interior wall. The new face didn't meet the old frame. Behind it lay a sliver of house, cool air, old dust, the smell of mouse. I slipped into that seam and breathed like the dead do when they're just practicing. Every sound wore a name after an hour. The windmill tick. The rooster's liquid questions starting before dawn. A stare that took offense at a particular step. Morning nodded the hollow into work. Voices moved through the braid of rooms. That first week I marked the Whitlock's habits the way a safecracker listens. Elias counted tools before he put them down. Ruth tucked hair behind her ear when she lied to the children, which was only when she didn't know a thing herself. Once, I crouched behind a half-open pantry door and heard them talk inside the kitchen's soft clatter. "We'll go tomorrow," Ruth said. "Deep trail?" Elias asked. She poured coffee. "It's thinned. Hasn't taken in a week. Then we'll take the deep one." One of the kids asked if they could stay up late. Ruth said yes, as if the permission cost her something. I drew a map in my head. Kitchen west. Dining table under the cross with the bird carved at its top. Front parlor with a faded blue settee. A staircase that curled. Upstairs, a master room with a balcony where wind found the curtain like a friend it had been missing. 2 small rooms below for the kids. One upstairs door nailed shut and covered by a tapestry whose woven tree had roots shaped like hands. Midweek, my toe found a tough spot in the kitchen rug. I lifted it and discovered the edge of a wooden hatch no bigger than the top of a nightstand, brass ring dulled to the color of a storm. 4 nails. I grew very still until the house told me it wasn't listening. Then I pried the nails and eased the hatch. Cold air climbed from below in a narrow ribbon. Iron. Stone. Something sweet, like a memory after it's turned. Steps ran down into black. I put it back. A Frogger survives by not rushing the temptation that looks exactly like a door opening just for you. Basements are either gifts or graves. You don't find out which by being first. 2 mornings later, the Whitlocks rose before light. I heard canvas whisper and metal clank. "It's a day and a night," Ruth said. "Maybe more. I want it done right." The kids cheered the way kids cheer when work that scares them is being done somewhere else. Boots left the porch. The windmill answered the quiet. The house held still long enough for me to believe the stillness. I slipped from the wall and crossed the kitchen without visiting the boards that complain. The hatch came easy. The stairs complained lightly, more for dignity than warning. The smell below sharpened as I went, iron and sour hay and cellar cool stone. My light is small and covered when it's on. I unwrapped just enough to be sure I wasn't walking into a hole. The basement was broad and ribbed with timber that had been an oak before it had been a beam, and in some places remembered. Hooks from the ceiling. Chains asleep in their rust. A table scarred by honest butchering laid with old work. Bones stacked in a wooden crate. A block of salt. Jars that had forgotten their labels but remembered what they were for. My gut ran, my head stayed. I've seen butcher rooms. I've slept in them when winter had me by the teeth. people in hollers cure meat next to prayers. That doesn't make them monsters. It makes them hungry and old. The far corner hid a pocket behind apple crates. Dust took my weight like a cat deciding I was permitted. I wrapped myself in my tarp, became shape without story, and drowsed in the cold. The hatch opened. Hinges groaned like a throat trying to find the right pitch to sing. I swallowed breath and fit my face between two slats in the crates. Light from above broke into small rivers across the steps. 4 sets of feet. Voices like church whispered in a sanctuary that didn't want them. Elias came first, shoulders hauled under the weight of something long and heavy. The shape across him was a person bent wrong by sleep or drugs. The woman's belly domed full as a harvest moon under the thin dress. Ruth followed with a bundle under her arm. Behind them came 2 figures robed to the floor in cloth as black as wet bark. Their hems were embroidered in pale thread with signs whose logic I could feel but not read. They cleared a space in the center. A low table scraped. The robed one dipped a carved bone stylus into a dark jar and drew a circle on the stone, wide, exact, slow. The line gleamed and bled into grooves chiseled there long before this night. A pentagram followed, tidy as a carpenter's cut. The other cracked a chest and took out a knife wrapped in red cloth, the fabric dark with old soak where the edge had met it too often. Ruth touched the woman's hair the way mothers do when they feel a fever without a hand. Elias set his jaw. He pressed his palm to the woman's brow, thumb stroking once like benediction, and slid the blade straight through her breastbone as if bone had decided to be water. Her eyes opened. That she didn't scream brought me a new fear. Blood came thick and obedient. It flowed to the cuts in the floor and followed the geometry like it had waited for that chance its whole life. The robed pair chanted in a language made of clicks and rough stones. Ruth walked up the steps and returned with something cup-like treasure. A goat's head, clean-cut and fresh, eyes milky, tongue lolling like it had a joke it wasn't going to tell. They took a saw to the woman's neck. The saw sang. When the head came free, the sound it made in the bowl wasn't a sound I'd been able to forget. They set the goat's head down upon the neck as if it were a crown being tested. Salt made a path. Coins clicked into the pattern at measured distances, a ring, a bent key, a gear tooth, each with a word and a nod. The air forgot how to be warm. My teeth ached. The body twitched. Fingers first, then a foot deciding whether to kick. The belly gathered and held, the skin too tight to be skin, and the goat mouth open like a yawn learning to speak. "Why have you summoned me?" it asked. The robed figures bowed so low their hoods found dust. Elias stood very straight. Ruth's mouth moved around a prayer she didn't let out loud. "The ground has gone hard," one figure said. "The creek is a vein with nothing in it. The trees flower and forget to fruit. We need the hollow to breathe." The goat head turned slow, the way you turn when you already know what you're going to see. It lifted both hands, and the table trembled. The voice dropped into a place beneath language and slept there. "You have wasted blood," it said. "You come thin." The robed ones glanced at each other with the fear of children who know which adult will be angry later. "This site needs to rest," one said. "A day. The lines to cool. We cleanse when we return. Every seam. Every crack. Every—" He stopped, the word hiding place hanging unspoken. I pulled air without sound and became plank. They locked the hatch. Not the way people lock a door, but the way a grave gets shut. Screws. Boards dragged across. A drill's small anger. Then the footsteps left. "I know you're here," the thing said. It said it like we were alone in a church and it didn't want to wake anyone. I kept my lungs shallow enough to be a rumor. "I smelled you when I came," it said. "You watched them. You have watched for days. You are small, but you are exact." It spoke like someone tasting words they already owned. My legs began to shake from the steadiness I demanded of them. "They will come back with hooks and oil," it went on, almost kindly. "They will burn the walls and call it cleanliness. They will find you and make you give them what they think the ground wants. I will help you leave." "Leave how?" The hatch was shut. The walls were earth. But the part of my brain that has never lied to me knew, if they returned, I would be a kind of ingredient. Break the salt, it said. Only one line. Then we shake hands. I help you, you help me. One wish. Wish is the word of wolves and men both. The room had grown colder than the creek outside could dream of being. My fingers were bone and blame. I stepped from behind the crates. The circle's grain shimmered so modestly I almost didn't see it. I pressed the toe of my boot to a single arc and tugged. 2 grains skipped. The line broke. The room's breath changed, a new pressure finding my ears. It unfolded to standing all at once, no wobble. The dress it wore was a ruin of linen, the goat head askew on a neck that had never grown up to want it. It lifted one hand. I lifted mine. Its palm was cold and dry and heavy as old paper when it met mine. The house exhaled. Turn around, it said. I did, because living is sometimes obeying without practice. Nothing touched me. When the sounds came, they came from above. A crash like furniture finding a wall too quickly. A scream cut short not with mercy but with decision. Wet sounds, which is as much as I will name them. Then the rattle of a body being a body in ways it shouldn't. The barricade was gone when I pushed the hatch. The kitchen smelled like pennies and rain. Lantern light moved in corridors in search of places to land. I went as soft as I know how, every step a sentence I decided to keep to myself. In the front room, the thing was already at work on the world. A robed man's jaw hung wrong, the rest of him trying to decide whether to stay. The other put both hands up and asked for his language to save him. The creature's hand went through him with the certainty of habit. Elias shot at once, and the wound closed like water after a stone. The shotgun's second shell never had a chance to be considered. The thing took him by the throat and fed itself on the part of a man that contains his noise. Ruth followed with a prayer and found a wall. I ran. The night outside was a lid. I ran to the edge of the green and threw myself into the dark that wasn't a dark so much as a line. My shoulder met the wall. It was nothing, which is to say it was everything pretending to be nothing. An invisible, absolute no. I hammered with my fists like I could make a yes. Behind me, the thing came on hands and feet, fast as the kind of dog that forgets about fences. It stopped inches from my face like someone who loved me and didn't know how to say it without breaking my teeth. Its breath was hot enough to be its own weather. It sat slowly, the way men who have been working all day sit. It folded its hands on its knees and put its head down with the patience of a teacher who is about to ask you to do something you're going to hate. My wish, it said. Wishes run on rails you can't see until after the train has already gone through you. I waited. My wish is this, it said. You must raise my kin. At first, the sentence was shapes without weight. Then its hands gripped its belly. The skin pulled tight as drum leather. The muscles beneath shuddered like something was trying to remember which way was out. Its fingers cut trenches in the ground. Blood came with the relentless frankness of gravity. It delivered on the property line. What fell into the grass was no heavier than a sack of flour, and wrong in ways that made my eyes want to fold themselves shut. Long limbs. Hair like a coarse pelt in the wrong places and baby thin in others. Wings small and leathery like a bat had decided to pretend, then lost the joke halfway through. A head too long. Eyes already open. It looked at me and, because some part of me is an animal, I did exactly what the animal part does. I lunged, pressed it to the ground, put a rock the size of a mailbox in both hands, and raised it to erase what the world had just tried to add. I brought the rock down. It giggled. Dad, it said. The rock left my hands like it had been invited to. I think I floated for a moment, the way you float when there's nothing below. Then I picked it up because it had reached for me, and my blood has never been able to ignore that reach. It fitted itself to my chest and found the notch under my chin like it had known it was there while the world was still being made. I walked back into the house with the thing against me. There was no blood. No bodies. The rug was the same old blue. The fireplace coals hummed with the soft red of long comfort. Upstairs, the master bed was made. The windmill turned outside at a speed that made the sound of contentment. That night I tried to kill it again because that's what a man who has loved anything and learned the cost will tell you is love, though it is only a sharp mask for fear. I set it on the floor and took the heaviest knife I could find and put both hands on the handle so the tremble wouldn't decide anything for me. The blade met skin and stopped like I had pressed it to cured hide. It tapped the knife with a curled baby finger and laughed a small practiced laugh that sounded human because it had learned from us. I found Elias's gun in a chest by the stairs, shells lying like soldiers. The bullet would not fire at its head. It would at mine. The first time, I woke on the porch with a new dent in the wood and a ringing big enough to live inside. The second time, I fell and woke in bed tucked with a wool blanket that smelled like cedar. The gun sat on the nightstand with the safety on like a parent who has decided to pretend this conversation is over. Days lost their names. The creature learned mine the way children learn it for their fathers, by making the shape of the sound and letting it bump around their mouth until it finds a place to live. It didn't eat. It liked to stand in the hall facing the ceiling and hum. Sometimes it rearranged the plates in the kitchen into circles, then spirals, then circles again, hands moving with a certainty that was older than it was. The wings pulled back into its back the way scars pull under skin when the weather changes. Its teeth straightened themselves. Its laugh became less guessing and more sure. I climbed the windmill when the sun was clean and counted the orchard rows from above. Something waited in the geometry. The windmill at the center point of a symbol I could not name without lying, the garden plots like lines drawn with a compass, the fence posts pounded at distances that matched a phrase. The hollow was a sign cut into the earth, and the house was ink. I jumped. The ground took me like a mattress. Pain came, but pain that didn't do paperwork. The creature clapped from the fence and smiled like a teacher whose student had finally solved the problem the wrong way. I tried to leave in 100 small, foolish ways. The wall was everywhere, an invisible skin at the edge of everything that mattered. If I ran east, it meant me. If I ran west, it was patient and waiting. I pressed against it like a tongue on a cracked tooth for weeks. Months. Time wrinkled. I aged in a direction that wasn't straight. My hair thinned at the temples and went coarse. My back bent just enough to remind me I was a person and not a ghost. I woke up some morning with a tremor in my right hand that did not ask permission. I grew old everywhere except where it mattered, which is to say I grew old at the speed of fear. Then one evening the porch and I learned another name for the person who lived with me. It stood in the doorway, a hand on the frame like anyone's son. The wings were gone. The mark remained, a small circle at the hairline that pulsed faintly like a coal under ash. Its face was a face you would trust if you didn't have a reason not to. Its eyes held a smoke the color of creek water when a cloud moves over the sun. "Thank you," it said, and it meant it. We went on like that for a long, strange mercy whether we'd earned it or not. The thing learned chores the way boys learn them in houses where work is love. It split wood with a rhythm you could time the day by. It carried water from the pump and never sloshed a drop. It watched storms arrive across the ridge with reverence. It would set an extra cup at the table without looking to see if I was near, because it knew somehow where I was and how far. Sometimes I found lines of salt poured and swept along windowsills, then repoured. Coins set at corners and moved an inch, then an inch back. Once I woke to find the front door open and the field beyond layered with circles pressed into the grass, as if a slow parade had visited while we slept and traced itself perfectly into the earth. I did not ask questions that would have made my mouth part of a machine. We didn't speak of the night below the hatch, or of Elias and Ruth and the two robed men whose names I still don't know. When the wind leaned into the porch from a particular direction and I smelled something like iron and wet wood the way you smell it when a barn's been laid open for butchering, I looked down the road and said the names of towns I had slept in under other roofs: Gunnison, Bisbee, Laramie, Wheeling. Saying them felt like counting rosary beads you've made out of old screws. One morning, I came down and found the tapestry from the nailed door draped over a chair. The nails had been removed so cleanly the holes looked like eyes. The room beyond was not a room. It was a closet sized like a coffin and painted with circles drawn so slowly they could have been prayers. In the center of the floor, a ring of ash that had not been disturbed by any breeze this house had known. I closed that door and put the tapestry back because my body wanted to, and when the thing saw what I had done, it nodded in a way that made me think I had been kind. A year, if any word belongs here the way it belongs out there, after the night I first slept under the house, a sound came that wasn't ours. Truck tires on the road. Doors. Voices asking not to be afraid and meaning do what we want. The men who walked the path to our porch wore canvas and the authority of people who think maps are oaths. County, one jacket said. Waterboard, said another. There had been, they told me, reports of an illegal draw off a creek that flows right and proper into a watershed that belongs to coal. I told them I didn't know about any of that, and poured coffee because pouring coffee is a spell older than most. They stood just inside the line, scuffing boots, laughing small laughs that asked their mouths to be brave for them. One tried the line with a toe, then laughed bigger and stepped back without being told. The map they had didn't have our square on it. No matter where they pointed, their finger never landed on a place that existed, not here. They got paler in the slow way men get paler when the light in a church shifts and the stained glass paints them different. We'll be back with the sheriff, one said, and meant we won't. After they left, the thing sat on the porch and traced small circles on its knee with one finger for a long time. They do not belong to this place, it said softly. Neither do I said. It looked at me in a way that made both sentences untrue. At night, I dreamed of the line at the edge of the hollow. In the dreams, the wall was visible, a pane of hammered glass with the seeds of old windows. On the other side, 12 versions of me walked past without seeing me. They all carried different bags. One had a wife. One had a scar. One had a church key tied to a belt loop. None of them looked up. I woke to the thing humming old songs I never taught it. It had found a tune inside a book whose tune existed only in ink, and the hum was the sound the book would make if it could. It's a peculiar loneliness, having a child who can read songs that were never written. In late summer, we walked the orchard rows at dusk. It had grown taller than me, though it ducked its head when it passed the low branch that taught me to duck first. It reached out and pressed its palm to the trunk of a pear tree like you press your hand to a friend's chest after an argument has ended but the air has not decided to forgive you yet. It breathes, it said. Everything does, I said. Not like this. When the goats birthed in the spring, we helped. The kids came quick, legs splayed, heads slick with the world. The thing caught them and wiped their faces and named them in a language that didn't need alphabet. They thrived. When one got sick in July, it sat with the kid in the straw and breathed slow, then slower, until the kid found its own pace and followed. In the morning, the goat's eyes were clear like lakes after a wind. Money appeared where money had to, toothpaste, boots, but I never counted it, and it never felt like luck. The pump never ran dry. The apples sugared without worms. The beans climbed in exact spirals around twine. You can call those things miracles if you want. I learned to call them days. The second time strangers came, they didn't wear county jackets. One of the robed men had traded his cloth for denim, but his posture betrayed him. He moved like a man who expected the earth to move too. 2 more walked behind with the slowness of hounds sniffing a trail they had a right to. A sheriff's car idled at the road like insurance against surprise. They stopped at the line and made a shape with their hands that meant nothing I wanted. The denim one took out a jar of gray powder and pinched some into his palm, then blew it across the dirt. It curved as if it had memory, then fell. No mark remained. He smiled with one side of his mouth. Circle still holds, he said. Even with the boy. The thing stood in the doorway with an expression that had made me trust him the first time I'd seen it pretend to be human. You learned words, it said to the man, and the gentleness of it made the hairs on my arms lift. We remembered them, the man said. There's a difference. I know, the thing said, and his smile held no teeth. What do you want? I asked, stepping down one step, then another. Only to visit, the denim man said. Don't lie, the thing answered, still gentle. The sheriff, to his credit or stubbornness, took off his hat and held it like a man does in a church he doesn't belong to but refuses to disrespect. "Folks up Hollow say there's a place here that don't appear on paper. They say a man is living on another man's deed and has no proof to show. I got to walk over and ask a few questions." "You can't," I said. He looked at the grass and at the line and at his boots. "Seems that way," he said, quiet now. The denim man squinted at the thing. "You lived on our breath once," he said. "You broke a line we set and came into our house and ate from our hands." "That's not what happened," I said. He ignored me. "We came thin that night. We come thick today." He lifted the jar like a toast. The thing stepped down off the porch and walked to the property edge and stopped with its toes on the ash. "You still don't know what you're feeding," it said. "You never did." "Then show me," the man said. The thing turned its head like it was listening under the soil. The windmill creaked once. The apples on the nearest tree gave off a smell that made my mouth water. The goats in the barn lay down all at once. The denim man laughed like a taunt and tossed a pinch of gray powder forward. It hit the air and fell straight down as if it had been offered a seat. "Step across," the man said. "I don't need to," the thing replied. He said something in that language of clicks and hard consonants, and the other two answered like a choir. The sheriff looked at the ground and counted boards on the porch step with his eyes, shame and stubbornness fighting in his shoulders. The denim man lifted the jar higher. A wind came out of the orchard low and slow like a dog deciding. "You were thin then," the thing said. "You are thinner now." The men's voices climbed. The jar shook in the denim man's hand. The thing raised one finger, and all the leaves in the nearest row turned their pale backs toward the sky. I don't tell the rest because telling it makes people listen wrong. I will say the man dropped his jar and it broke without sound and the powder fell in a shape that looked like a map of the hollow if the map had been drawn by a blind man who loved us. The sheriff retired that spring and learned to grow squash on the far side of the ridge. And sometimes in town when a certain hymn is sung, two men standing by the back wall put their hands in their pockets and wait outside until it's over. After that, the road to Black Laurel Hollow forgot how to be found by people we didn't choose. A woman in a yellow dress returned once with sugar, and a note that said for the boy in a hand like river reeds. The thing wasn't a boy by then, not by any measure that keeps its ink straight, but I thanked her at the road all the same. We made cider. We set jars. We lived like a memory that never had to end, which is to say we lived like people who knew every day had a cost and paid it without counting. The winter that followed proved what we were together. Snow took the ridge first. Then it came down into the hollow like a slow idea. It stopped at the line. This is a thing I tell and people say it's fancy, but I can show you, on days when weather is in notion and not in order, the ash brightens and the wind forgets us. The world outside can howl and skewer itself on ice and the hollow will hum like a warm stove. January brought a knocking that wasn't human. Branches on the siding. A loose latch tapping like a patient finger. I went room to room and checked every window and found each one shut exactly the way Ruth had taught them to close years before, turned, then lifted, then seated into the frame so the sill never had to hold a grudge. The sound continued. I stood in the master bedroom and realized it came from upstairs, behind the tapestry. I didn't want to. I did anyway. The nails were still out. I lifted the cloth and opened the door. The room smelled like cold and ash. The circle on the floor, the one that never took dust, had acquired a border of mouse prints that stopped in a perfect arc and turned back the way they'd come. The knocking paused, then started again, delicate as a child practicing the alphabet on a table with their fingers. The thing stood beside me, so close I felt heat through my shirt. "You don't have to," it said. "You put the tapestry on the chair," I said. "You don't have to," it repeated softer. I stepped inside. The knock came once, twice, friendly as a neighbor. I knelt at the circle's edge and pressed my palm to the floor just outside the ash. The wood felt warm enough to be interesting. I leaned down and listened. On the other side of that floor, a beetle scratched a clean and polite path along a joist. That was all. I laughed a laugh that ran through my nose and shamed me with relief. It's a bug, I said. Everything is, if you say it right, the thing answered. The next day the sun came back. The snow upridge slid and refroze and went to ground the way old grudges do, quiet and dull. Spring wrote the orchard brighter. The goats birthed. The creek chattered with a little more confidence. The thing fixed fence like a prayer. I learned to sleep through the windmill's speech and wake to the sound of jars finding their seal. A letter came addressed to occupant. The stamp was brown with a bird. The handwriting was a schoolteacher's, careful into its corners. There was no return address. I set it on the table and circled it all day like a dog around a new chair. At dusk I opened it. I was the one in the yellow dress years ago. I live 3 counties over now. I do not tell anyone your place, but I tell this to you, folks talk of cutting a road across the ridge to reach a seam they miss first time. Men with money don't say creeks out loud, but they say trucks. I thought you'd want to know before a stranger did. I showed it to the thing. It read without touching. They will try to come through the place where the road remembers it used to be, it said. Is that a riddle? I asked. It is a map, it replied. We walked out at dawn and followed the old logging track beyond the ash to a point where the land dipped and rose like a breath. Deer had found a way across the years. So had men once. The trace of that went on under the moss where boots had written their language, and the dirt had chosen to keep it. We stood a while and listened. Far off, a truck practiced its cough. We can't stop them from trying, I said. We can, the thing said. We can't stop them from wanting. Is that different? It's the only difference, it replied. For 3 days we worked without deciding we were working. We stacked fallen stones within the ash line. We pruned the orchard and laid the branches in a lattice that meant something I didn't have the words for. We reseated fence posts to distances that looked random to any eye but ours. We drew water from the pump and poured it along furrows that had been straight yesterday and came gently curved today. On the 4th day, the trucks came. Not many, enough to test, not enough to win. Men in orange vests with clipboards and men in hard hats with hands that no longer remembered tools. They got out and cursed the mud they'd brought with them. The first one stepped across the shade of the ash line by accident and tripped on nothing. He laughed, then didn't. The second waited for the joke to end, and it didn't. The third took a stick and poked the air, and the stick moved like it had found molasses. Roads washed out, one said to the other as if words could replace what their legs were telling them. The man in the orange vest pointed past the orchard. We can cut over there. They could not. They tried and circles opened in front of them like puddles that were not water. They did not sink. They simply didn't arrive. After a while, a logic they didn't own but remembered obeying made them back the trucks out and sit on their bumpers and drink water and look up at the sky like men do when they choose to be smaller than their job for 5 minutes. The thing stood beside me on the porch and watched with an interest so pure it wasn't cruel. They'll say the road is cursed, it said. They'll say the road is too expensive, I said. That's what cursed is if you work for money, it replied. After that, time stretched thin. We lived in the place between 2 thoughts. The goats had another generation. The orchard put on a kind of sweetness I don't know how to tell strangers about without sounding like I'm lying. I wrote by lamplight now and then, small things, a list of boards that needed replacing, a sketch of the windmill's cogs, a note of where the best mushrooms had been last fall. I kept meaning to write the story the forum would expect from me after all these years, the longest stay, the most dangerous house, the absurd hiding place. I put it off the way you put off things that might break you by being finished. One evening, I woke from a chair nap with the kind of certainty that empties a man. The house was quiet. The orchard was loud with crickets. The thing sat on the steps, elbows on knees, face tipped toward the path the way a father waits for the sound of his child's car late at night. You hear something? I asked. Yes, it said. No. Which is it? It's the color of a sound, it answered. I sat beside him and listened for a color. After a while, I heard nothing and then everything: the goats' wet mouths tearing grass, the wind turning the windmill by finger lengths, the creek practicing one bar of a song it couldn't finish. Inside that, at last, a footstep. A boy came down the path from the ridge with a backpack too big and shoulders that had learned to make themselves small. He moved like he expected to be hit from a direction he couldn't predict. When he reached the line, he looked at his feet and stopped in the exact way most people don't, like he could feel the no and respected it. He didn't try to step over. He didn't turn away. He lifted his head. "Evening," he said, voice cracked with thirst. "Evening," I answered. "I'm not here to steal," he said. "I'm just thirsty. Water's for anyone who asks," I told him. "Don't have to come in," the thing said softly. "We can bring it to you." The boy's eyes found the thing and skittered and returned. "Yes, sir," he managed. "Sir, not to me. Sir, to my son." I filled a jar at the pump and walked to the line and held it out across nothing. The boy took it and drank like his body had finally gotten an answer. He sat on a stump outside the ash, careful as someone who has seen men make rules against sitting. When he finished, he stared at the jar as if he could will it to refill. "How old are you?" I asked. 15, he said quickly, and the truth of it wandered around his mouth looking for a place to sit. I didn't press. "What's your name?" "Evan," he said. No last name. He kept it like people keep knives. The thing sat on the top step the way he does when he is choosing how much and who for. "You got a place to sleep?" he asked. "Sometimes," Evan said. "Not tonight," I said. "You'll sleep on the porch. No one will step on you there." He looked at the line. He looked at the orchard. He looked at the thing. "I don't got no money to pay," he said. "You already did," the thing told him. "You asked?" That night I lay in bed and thought about the first time I'd slept under a roof that didn't want me and the last time I had wanted a door that admitted me. The windmill ticked out an answer only I could understand. In the morning, Evan was still there, sitting straight-backed on the step like he'd been placed. The thing handed him a plate with eggs on it and bread. He ate fast and clean. He didn't look up until he was finished, then he said, "Thank you," with both hands around the plate. "What are you running from?" I asked when his mouth was empty. Evan set the plate down on the porch and folded his hands in his lap and stared at them. "A man who counts me," he said. "A man like a father?" I asked. "A man who counts me," he repeated. The thing nodded like that made sense to him. Maybe it did. "You heading somewhere?" I asked. "No," he said. "I'm heading away." He stayed one night then too. On the third day he stood at the line and told us he had to keep going. He did not say thank you because he had already said it right, and I did not ask him to because I already had what I needed. He walked up the path with the backpack that looked smaller now he'd borrowed a little gravity from us. The thing watched until the ridge took him away. After a while, my son said, "He didn't ask to come in." "He didn't need to," I answered. "Will he be okay?" my son asked. "No one is," I said. "Not without someone else." He was quiet a long time. "You were not okay," he said, not as a question. "No," I told him. And then I was less not. Fall came again and showed us what we'd missed in summer. Light found the orchard at angles it had been too busy to consider in July. The ash line brightened when storms threatened and dimmed when the sky decided to be kind. We put up jars until the shelves were full and the kitchen had a new smell it would remember until spring. We slept the way men sleep who have built a thing together and are allowed to be tired in the same house. On a Sunday that wasn't but felt like, I woke to the sound of a hymn from the ridge. Voices stuck around a note and refused to move. I walked out and stood by the porch. The thing came slow from the barn, wiping his hands on a rag he did not need. We listened. The hymn ended with a cough. I looked at the ash. It did not brighten. "People," I said. "People," he said. They came single file. Not robed. Not official. Town people and not A woman in a yellow dress near the front. Men with hats off. A child on a man's shoulders to see better. They stopped at the line without being told. The woman in yellow lifted a hand. I brought you sugar, she said, and held out a bag. Thank you, I said, and my voice found a place to sit in my throat. She nodded toward the orchard. This place has fed folks without asking for pay. Jar left on the road frees a hand to teach a child something else. I came to tell you the store in town is putting your name on a list and folks can set in $1 when they can't bake one. If you don't want that, say it plain. We don't need a list, I said. We do, she answered. We need to know the shape of our thanks. The thing stepped down one step and then another until his toes touched the line. He looked at the woman and then at the child on the man's shoulders who had both hands in his father's hair like reins. He nodded once. Leave it at the road, he said. We will find it. The woman smiled without teeth the way old mountain women smile when they see your luck and decide not to hate you for it. The people put small things at the line: flour, sugar, a spool of twine, a book of recipes, a packet of seeds saved from a grandmother's last good tomatoes. They did not cross. The ash held and didn't need to. The transaction was not a transaction. That night the wind was busy but kind. We set the gifts on the table like a harvest, not because we needed any of it, but because you don't waste the shape of thanks. Men forget themselves when they do. I went out to the porch to breathe air that other people had filled with voices that weren't asking for anything. The thing came out and sat beside me. We watched fireflies draw small proofs in the dark. Are we safe? I asked, not because I needed an answer, but because I wanted to hear him say the word. We are a line, he said. Safe is what people say when they want a line to be a wall. We aren't a wall. What are we? A place that keeps its name when it is spoken wrong, he said. We sat until the sky broke itself into stars. Somewhere beyond the ridge a truck practiced its cough. The world did what it does, rolled, forgot, remembered, asked again. Sometimes I stand at the edge where everything says no and press my hand against nothing that is the only thing that has ever told me the truth. I feel the faintest warmth run through it from the other side, like a pulse. Like proof. Years later, enough that my hair forgot its color and remembered white, someone on the forum messaged under a new handle and asked the questions they always ask when they've sharpened themselves on the wrong stone. What's the longest stay undetected? What's the most dangerous house? The most absurd hiding place? I typed an answer and deleted it, and typed another and deleted that too. At last I wrote. A windmill at the center of an orchard where snow stops. Stay as long as you are asked to. Leave when you cannot tell which side of the ash is home. I didn't post it. I set the old phone face down and went outside where my son was mending a fence that didn't need mending because his hands needed to remember. Do you miss it? He asked without looking up. What? Being a ghost. I thought about crawl spaces and attics and the way other people's walls hold heat that doesn't belong to them. I thought about the first night under the house and the last morning before I stopped counting. I thought about a boy on the road asking for water with a jar between him and a line he didn't try to cross. No, I said. I like being seen by what matters. He hammered a nail and it seeded with a sound like a period. He straightened and rested the hammer on his shoulder and looked out across the orchard like a man surveying his own ribs. The windmill turned. Thank you, he said. For what? I asked. For breaking a line, he said. For keeping another. We went back to work. The goats grumbled. The apples fattened. Far away, trucks like storms forgot our name. Nearer, a woman in a yellow dress wrote a list in a careful hand and a child reached for his father's hair, not to pull, but to hold. On the table inside, next to the spool of twine and the seeds and the Bible with another spine hidden in its binding, sat a folded paper with my forum handle on it in a scrawl that used to be mine. When I opened it later, after the sun had decided to leave us in charge for a while, I found nothing written inside. Which felt right. Because the story that would have gone there was already outside, breathing, planted in rows, turning leaves toward whoever asked without stepping over what kept them whole.